if you want to borrow more money, you want to make the banker's life as easy as possible. If you just dump 17 pages of PDFs and it's all a jumble, they're going to be looking for an excuse to say no.
We are back in your life, and today, brought to you by Lighthouse Financial, we're talking to you about the 3 things you need to know before you buy an investment property. We got Matt Harris, we got Michael Vincent. Gents, when I look at the numbers, property investors now account for 23% of property purchases in 2025, which is up 22% compared to last year. Feels like property investors are starting to come back a bit.
We're back, baby.
We're back. They're definitely back in the market. Everyone knows that when interest rates are high, the activity in this market is reduced, and as interest rates come down again, those investors come back. So I don't think it's a surprise.
I think it's just a normalization of the market activity. And I think for investors at the moment, there's really quite an interesting point in the market. We've had the interest rates have dropped, but we haven't seen the prices skyrocket. Right. So, are they going to skyrocket? Who knows? Do they stay flat for a while? Again, but no, I can't predict the future. I'm just a mortgage broker. But, there's some good bargains out there. And people are now like, the risk is off because the rates have come down. Let's do this.
Okay. So let's break down those 3 things we need to know. Mike, the first one is for those that have never bought an investment property before, but have a house with some equity in it. How the hell do you use the equity to buy a house? Do I have to find some cash from somewhere? Some secret handshake with the bank? How do you do it?
It's quite often a lot of those things all in one. Yeah.
What
the
is
secret handshake should be with the mortgage broker. The mortgage broker then can whisper slightly, very quietly to the banker. They're usually in a dark room. You don't look them in the eye.
Sweet nothings.
Pretty much, man. They speak in code. But basically, to use equity in your property, as a really quick example, let's say you've got $1 million house. You can lend to 80% of the value of that house. That could be $800,000. And let's say you've got a $600,000 mortgage. The difference between your mortgage and how much you can lend on the house, that's your usable equity. So in this case, that's $200,000. You then take that $200,000 and you can physically take it. So you can borrow it and then go to another bank, or you can just go to the same bank and go, hey, top me up against that usable equity. You take that and you use it as a deposit on the next property. So with a $200,000 deposit, you could buy an investment property up to maybe over $1 million.
Matt, for people who have never done this before, the idea of taking on more debt and exposing their home as security would scare people. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, I think they are right to understand the risk, because there is risk associated with using the equity in your own house to secure another asset. I think to balance that view out, when you look at bricks and mortar investment, which is basically houses, they are a pretty relatively safe investment, and I'll tell you why. So first of all, you get an income stream from them, rent. And then secondly, and this is a really important point that a lot of people miss, is that actually you can pretty much insure against all the risk that arises. So you've got house insurance, which covers the house, the asset. You've got, you can get tenant or landlord insurance, which covers the risk of the tenant. You can get loss of earnings insurance, which covers the risk of you not being able to pay your mortgage, for example. And you can get life insurance, which covers the family risk if something happens. So I think it's relatively safe. I think you should consider the risk, but to be honest, if you want to get ahead in this world, you do need to take a little bit of risk here and there.
That's right. The only, nobody's getting out of this thing alive, so you got to take some risk at some point. Yep. Let's move on to point number 2 around structuring your debts in the right way. Matt, why does it matter? Why do you need to keep your owner-occupied debt and your investment property debt separate? Why can't we just throw it all together?
Yeah, I put quite simply, one's tax deductible, one's not.
What does that mean? Because some people out there might hear that and go, tax deductible, I don't actually know what that means.
Yeah, so if I have a private home that I live in, I'm going to have a whole lot of costs that are associated with that. Rates, interest, insurance, etc. Because I do not derive income from the house, it's a private undertaking. I don't have to file a tax return. I can't claim any of those costs.
Yeah.
But if I have an investment property, I'm going to be deriving income. So I'm going to get a rental income stream, and I'm going to have a whole lot of costs which I incur to get that rent. So when I file my tax return at the end of the year, I want to be able to tally as many costs as I can against that rent so that I can reduce my tax bill as low as possible.
Yeah, and then the interest on that loan against your investment property, that bit you can count as a cost, right? So that's the interest deductibility piece.
That's right. And so if I have 2 properties, for example, and one I live in and one's an investment property, in an ideal world, I want the most debt that I can against that investment property because it's tax deductible. I want the minimum against my own occupied property because it is not.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about the interest only versus principal and interest
James,
bit?
we could go on for hours about this. I love this.
Also, tell me about the handshake, Mike.
Yeah.
Is it like a snap?
Yeah,
or like
yeah.
The calves, the thighs are out. That's all
yeah.
part
The
of it.
the calves are going. It is summertime.
I missed the memo on shorts Friday, and I'm thankful for it, to be honest.
I popped it in the chat. Yeah. You saw that comment and you didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And I know it's because you don't train those legs. And you when you go to the beach, you love a baggy board short.
Yeah, shin swinger.
Yeah. Shin
the
swinger.
Billabong shin swingers.
Isn't that obvious I don't train legs?
Yeah. Look, you can make those pants as tight as you want. So anyway, I don't know how we got to interest only versus principal and interest to calves. We just wouldn't talk about them really.
Yeah. So interest only versus principal and interest. Because of what Matt was talking about with the interest deductibility piece and the interest cost on your investment property loans being a cost that you can deduct from the income to pay less tax or pay an appropriate amount of tax, you want to generally keep that investment property debt around as long as possible. But the same's not for that owner-occupied debt, right? That's bad debt. You're not making any money off this. Like, some cap gains at some point in the future, but that's not what we're talking about. So you want to focus on paying down that debt as quickly as you can, right? Just, absolutely go hell for leather on that owner-occupied debt. So we'll put that on principal and interest, but then the investment property debt, potentially we're keeping that on interest only so that we're focusing on paying down the bad debt and keeping that good debt.
And can I just jump in there? Because this just really reminds me of a common mistake that people can make on the tax deductible side. So when you have an interest-only mortgage, that's really easy. The interest is all deductible. When you have a P&I or table mortgage, a portion of that is capital, so that's reducing the loan, and then a portion of it is interest. I often see people who have done their own tax returns who will claim the whole lot.
Whoa, how good.
That's not the worst of the tax mistakes that we've seen when it comes to property investors. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down some of the most important things you need to do to minimize your tax with your investment property. And we're going to do that after this break.
If you're starting to think that you're closer to your second property or that first investment property than you realize, get in touch with the team at Lighthouse today. We can talk you through equity, leverage, how to buy the property, and then really importantly, how to structure it correctly to minimize your tax obligations. So if that sounds like you, click the link in the show notes below. Now, back to the episode.
So let's start to talk about tax. Matt, I want to start with the basics because people start doing all this random stuff where I'm like, I got to buy a Dodge that weighs over so many kilos to make it tax deductible. Yeah. Let's not focus on the US.
Is that a crypto reference?
What is it? Like a truck? Oh, so it's like a work truck.
Dodge,
are we in America?
America.
Let's start with the basics though.
Yep.
Have a separate bank account for the rental property.
Honestly, this is the pro tip of the century. People don't do this. And so if you want a really expensive tax return, mix your income and expenses up over 7 bank accounts and watch us charge you to make sense of that. Also, do you really want us seeing all your personal and private stuff? No, you don't. So set up 1 bank account per property if you can. So you just do the suffixes. Yeah. You can do multiple properties in 1 bank account, but as long as there's only that going in there. So rent comes in, rates, interest, mortgage go out. If you need to top it up directly into that account. At the end of the year, you can drop 12 months of your PDF out. You have 70% of a tax return already done.
Yeah, I think that is like a really key thing. And if you've got multiple properties, just run 1 account for that property. Loan account, transactional account, loan account, transactional account. Here's a hot tip. You can go on your internet banking, you can name them just so you can keep track of them easier. And because honestly, it is phenomenal how many people, like we're talking about, don't do that. And it just makes everyone's job so much harder.
And you know what? When you go to see the bank for the next mortgage and they see your very tidy accounts, it's going to be a little tick in your favor when you want to borrow again.
Yeah, that is a huge thing. And again, like, not to drill into it too much, but if you want to borrow more money, you want to make the banker's life as easy as possible. If you just dump 17 pages of PDFs and it's all a jumble, they're going to be looking for an excuse to say no, right?
Well, Matt, speaking of like Captain Obvious tax tips, the second one, have a folder for all of your key documents when it comes to your tax return.
Yeah, so this is another one that we see a lot in here. People can't find really basic documents, right down to the point where maybe they've done a renovation on a bathroom, and you'd think you'd just keep the invoices, if not just for the warranty purposes. Simple thing is just have a Google Drive or a desktop folder, whatever it is. Every time you get an invoice or insurance thing, just drop it in there. Name it insurance. There's only some key documents that investors have. Interest-related documents, so your bank loans, you have insurance-related documents, then you have rates, which is your council stuff, and then you got your tenancy stuff. There's not much more to it than that. Set up some nice folders, get it in there. And this might seem really, really basic. You might go, Matt, tell me how to avoid paying tax. Well, I'm not going to tell you that today or any day, but this is important. Keep it simple. Keep it tidy. Property should be treated like a business.
Yeah.
Good business people have their affairs in order.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it's everything right from settlement, right? So like the settlement statement when you buy the property right the way through. Again, like if you keep it filed correctly, it is so much easier.
And you know what? We'll be able to find every deduction that you're entitled to if you have those documents.
Let's move on to chattels, Matt. How does that work? That's getting a little bit more sexy, a little bit
What's a chattel, James? Tell me what a chattel is.
Sexy, isn't
Matt,
it?
you're the accountant. You tell me what a chattel is.
So a chattel is anything that is attached inside a building but not an integral part of it. So
Michael's not integral.
Non-structural fixtures and fittings.
If he wears those shorts again, he's pretty non-integral around here.
Mate, do you know productivity drops at Lighthouse by 37% when Mike and I whip out the calves?
Yeah, I can imagine there's a lot of distracted people. So a chattel basically is a really basic example: carpets, curtains, light fittings. Chattels can go right down to light switches. What they are is something that is present in all properties. And if you have an investment property, you can get what's called a chattels valuation. That's a property valuer basically comes in and they value all the chattels in situ. They provide a nice big depreciation report and you can start claiming against them. It's an important deduction because it's what we call a non-cash expense. So when you buy a property, those chattels aren't split out. You just buy the property. We then get this valuation. You haven't paid any additional cash for these items, but we then get to deduct them.
Moving on to calculating your weekly profit. Huge problem. People spend the tax. You can't spend the tax. You should save the tax.
Yeah, so this one's interesting because if you're under 5,000 residual income tax, so that's your bill was less than $5,000 a year, you don't have to pay it till much later. That can cause problems, but also benefits. So the benefit is that you can use that tax money to do other things, maybe buy other properties, invest in the stock market. I don't know. That's up to you. But if you get to terminal tax date, which is generally the 7th April, and you don't have the money, you can have a problem. So if you have a high cash flow property, if you're going to be over 5,000 RIT, you're going to have provisional tax, which is going to help you do it throughout the year. Either way, you're going to have to plan for it. There are things called tax pooling accounts where you can deposit money, put in there, and you can get it back quite easily. Otherwise, my favourite, and it will be a favourite of lots of property investors, is an offset account.
I love an offset.
Yep.
So it's your money.
Well, I love it because it's not a revolving credit, so people aren't as likely to spend it.
Correct. And so if you have an offset account, you can have an amount of loan against that. The more money you have in your offset account, the less interest you pay. So I would just recommend that if you're going to be serious about this, that you look after your tax and you use it whilst you've got it, and then you give it to the inland revenue when they want it.
Yeah.
How often does it happen? Like, because I've run into customers and they're like, "Oh, I've got $100,000 tax bill and I don't know where I'm going to find the money," which is the reality is they've spent the money. How often do clients spend their tax and then run into a problem with it?
Relatively often, unfortunately. And that's why provisional tax is a thing, because the inland revenue, the government know that this is what human nature is like. So provisional tax you pay in installments. We still have problems though when we send out the provisional tax notices and people go, "I just don't have the money." So there's ways to manage it, but I think the big risk area is the first year, when you haven't filed a return, you don't have provisional tax, but you're effectively carrying a liability, you don't have to file your first year tax return until up to a year after that year's ended if you've got a tax agent.
Yeah.
So 31 March 26, for example, is the current year. If you have a tax agent, the latest date to file that's 31 March 2027. If you started in 1 April 2025, it's 2 years after you started in business.
That's a big bill.
It's a big bill. So you've just got to be careful with it. If you have questions, just ask your friendly accountant.
And
I think that's,
friendly?
I think that's a really important point, right? Is like, we're giving the information out here, but actually, like, you don't need to know all this stuff off by heart. Like, if you've got a good accountant, they can help you take care of this. And I said help you because you still need to take some responsibility. You can't get to the end of the year and go, well, I pay you to file my returns. I don't know what's going on. Like, you do need to know what's going on. You need to track it. It's like a business, right? If you take your eyes off the wheel, it's going to run off the road. Just quickly though, quick segue before we start to wrap up. You talked about a tax-free threshold of kind of $5,000 somewhere, or like a delayed payment.
Careful now. It's not a tax-free threshold.
Is there like, if I'm boarding a property, is there a certain level under which I don't have to claim that?
Yeah, so if border income, and you've got to be really careful with this because a border income is a very specific type of income. I don't know, they change, it goes up and down. I think it's about $205 a week you can earn without having to file a return. Don't quote me on that. Emily will put the link to the border rules in the podcast notes.
You can quote him.
But yeah, there are some circumstances where you don't have to return the income. It's very small.
Yeah, and you just got to be careful with that stuff. You don't want to be assuming there's a tax-free anything. Assume there's tax.
Yeah, but fundamentally, if you're not sure if investment property is right for you or whether it's a good idea, interest rates have come down dramatically. Property prices are yet to move. It might be a good option for you to look at an investment property, grow your wealth. If you do go down the investment property side, just make sure, Matt, you keep a tidy house, right?
That's right. Tidier the better.
Yeah. You got to make your bed in the morning.
If you got time to lean, you got time to clean. Sorry, it's a McDonald's quote.
Yeah. Speaking of time, we are all out of time. We're going to wrap it up there. Please make sure to give us a like, review, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.
Cheers.
Thanks.